Welcome back to Gun Tote Minnesotan. So real quick, I wanted to just give you an update on this blade. That is the Condor, the Matt Graham kind of model, and it's called the Primitive Camp Knife. And I've just been working with it for a couple months now, maybe over a month at least. And you know, it's a real quality knife. I'll give you some quick specs again, just in case you didn't watch my previous video. It's a piece of 1095. It's got kind of a light coating over the blade, nothing too bad. I was able to patina through it a little bit. The handles are micarta. They're nice and big. I'm a big fella, 6'5", 225 pounds, pushing it a little bit, 225. This knife is pretty thin. That's I think 3 mils thick. So it's nice and thin. I really like that. It's a Scandinavian grind. I really haven't put any micro bevel or anything on it. Didn't come with one. It came a little bit dull towards the tip, but now I've been using it for a while and I really like it. The only thing that I've done to the knife is I've sanded up some of the scales, which I plan to do more of when I get a chance. Just a little sharp around here when I first got it. This part of the blade right up here, they kind of left it. Some people like that. I hate it. I want that blade sharp all the way back to the handle. But I've been using it for a couple months now, and like I've been saying in my previous videos, is I really meant to get out and give you a final opinion about it. Well, behind me here is, if you can even see this in frame, this right here was a birch tree that was dead, and I needed it because I had some mushrooms on it, some particular mushrooms I wanted. If you know your mushrooms, go ahead and comment below what this guy was. It's the white mushroom that grows on here. It's not the horseshoe tinder fungus, it's something else. It's pretty common. But yeah, it's a good quality tree. I like it. And I noticed that some of the wood was still usable in here. I could dry it out, carve some spoons, which is a traditional, kind of your traditional Swedish Scandinavian spoon is going to be out of birch. So I chopped this tree down with that knife. I wasn't using anything baton with it, just hacking at it with a knife. And for a knife that has about a 5-inch blade, that's only 3 mil thick, I cut down a tree like that without hand fatigue, without beating anything up. So took some pretty good chunks out. Did really well. And yeah, it's kind of a green wood. I mean, it's not alive anymore, but it's still kind of a green wood. I'm pretty impressed though with the chopping capability of the knife. I didn't want a big honking meat cleaver hanging to my leg to chop down trees with. I just don't do stuff like that very much. And if I do take down a tree, it's usually something small like this. And I can baton on the back with another stick or something like that. But this knife did really well without any of that extra support. It didn't hurt my hand. It didn't fatigue my hand. It's not great without a lanyard. I think for some people a lanyard is going to be necessary. Might have to drill a hole in there. For me, I was just careful about it. There's not enough on here. I know Matt Graham was thinking this would be enough, but I don't think it's enough unless you're doing light chopping like this. Just quick things. If you're actually doing real chopping, it could slip out. But those handle scales are fantastic. The thickness is fantastic. I love this handle overall. It's my favorite attribute of this knife, and the thinness of that blade. Really good. Let me show you something else. This blade gives you a nice wide amount to work with. You don't cut yourself. And contrary to what you'd think, birch bark can be kind of tough on the blade's edge when you're cutting it this way. It's like cutting through a lot of paper at once. So in order to make the best use of it, I usually start with a line, and I push the knife down the line, and then when I unwrap the birch bark, it gives me usable stuff. I don't have to waste it.
See, it takes nice bites out of there. Not as good as a carving knife. That's specifically for carving, but as far as an outdoors knife goes, Very good. Control is pretty decent. There we go.
Okay, so there you go, debarked that. That was some firm material on there. The knife holds up just fine. So I have a little bit of birch bark here. I'll just hit the fire steel a few times. So if you haven't seen my previous videos, you'll see that it works just fine with the fire steel. And in fact, if I had a good piece of mica or quartz or flint, I'd use that instead. I just don't have one in hand. This spring I'll have to go out. I think I was talking previous video, I was hoping to get out with Larry Roberts this spring and get down to the river, and we'll find something. We'll find some flint. He's going to show me around a little bit, I think, and tell me some of the tips, because I could use some. Finding a rock that can spark on here, it's kind of an eye thing. You got to know what you're looking for. There we go. So one of the other things I was going to show you, if you commented below, this is just the birch polypore, common mushroom, not hard to find in most places. This one happens to be really hard right now. It is winter, so I'm going to cut it in half here. Show you one of the uses. It's an odd thing that it's so hard, because what's inside is a very, very soft piece that you can use as a strop. It's an excellent strop, actually. Probably the best thing in nature to use as a strop that I have access to anyways. Once you get it cut open, it's not hard to take slices out. It's kind of like a piece of wood, but it's very soft in here. It reminds me of like a marshmallow on the inside of this. This doesn't have much to do with the knife, other than the fact that when I'm out in the woods, and I have just like, let's say, a diamond rod or something, something glass to hit the edge and create that burr, this really does truly work as a strop, just like a piece of leather, to run your knife over it, as long as you know what you're doing. It's a little bit soft, so it's kind of like a soft strop, but it truly works, and it's fantastic. There's other things you can do with these. You dry them out, use them as tinder, stuff like that. I think you might be able to do something medicinal with them. You definitely can cut it in half and put it on a wound and help it for wound packing. This will absorb a little bit. Interesting mushroom. So anyways, that knife, in the finesse that I needed to do that, it handles that just fine. You had something kind of like this, and you needed to drill out a small piece of wood. It's a pretty big tip on that knife. So getting inside to make a small bow drill divot, it does make a pretty large gash in the wood. It doesn't take much though. If you've done much for bow drills, it really doesn't take much. I'm not actually using this one because it's maple and I just don't see a lot of need to do this right now, but in making a bow drill set, even a little micro set like this, making your hearth board and that kind of thing is pretty quick. I wouldn't use the same kind of wood on both, but the finesse for the knife is there. I've done far too many feather sticks with this knife. So anyways, if you just needed a functional feather stick, get a fire started, that kind of thing, the knife does all that just fine. So ultimately, the reason that I picked up the primitive camp knife was to have a little bit of integrity in something I had previously said. And I had really bashed Condor over the 1075. I just thought it was such a low quality steel, and it is. I'm very confident in that. It's a very low quality steel, very common steel. not something that I think that they should be using overall. Maybe in machetes I could give it that, but in knives and especially a belt knife, something like that, a little bit better steel was definitely needed. And so they came out with the 1095. It had been out for a while. I hadn't seen much on it. I picked up this blade and I used it for a lot of things. Like, I'm going to show a clip here to kind of finish off the video in a second of some spoons that I worked on. I carved some really hard wood with it, really hard black walnut. It's if you've never worked with black walnut, it's got a consistent grain to it, but it's a very hard wood. And I've done, you know, plenty of the batoning, cross batoning, stuff like that, just to show that that really thin blade stock did not hinder it. It's actually fantastic. It slips right through wood of appropriate sizes. I'm not trying to baton 5-inch pieces of wood. I'm batoning 4, 3-inch, stuff like that, and it definitely gets through there. Ergonomics of the blade were fantastic. The blade does spark a fire steel really well. 1075, I had some trouble with that. It would eventually need to be, you know, resharpened on the spine, and I mean after just a few uses on a fire steel, it could dull that out so fast. So 1095 is just really my preference. The steel is worth it. This blade, if you can pick it up for that around $50 price point, that's what I got mine for. I really do think it's valuable. The handle was fantastic. If you're a bigger guy than I am, like I said, I'm 6'5", 225 pounds, something like that, so you can get an idea of how big my hands are. The way that I use the knife and I choke up on it, there's still some left over. You could be a bigger person than I am, have some big mitts, and this knife will still fit you. Overall, it's not going to replace my carving knives. I think I'll comment on that in the next portion of the video. It's not going to replace my carving knives, but as far as a one knife that I go out with and I don't feel like carrying a lot extra, there's always a second, right? Usually some sort of pocket folder. This does really well for all those things though. It's very easy to clean off, it's very easy to sharpen, it stays pretty sharp, as sharp as 1095 really does, and I'm very content with that. I'm still working on this little ricasso thing here, whatever you want to call it, the unsharpened portion. I'm going to keep hitting that with a file, and then probably work sharp it down into a Scandi. So I really wish it had that from the start. Matt Graham, don't put this stuff on here. I just think it hurts the features of the knife, the look of the knife. It just looks stupid to have a stamp on there. But overall, very functional blade. Really big fan. Condor did well with this. I'd like to see if somebody has a review of that Condor primitive mountain knife as well. I haven't heard much on that. I've only seen one review online that exists about that blade, and it's not in English. And so that might be something worthwhile for you, but overall the handle in this is the reason I bought it. The sheath, so my final 2 cents here on the sheath. I cut it up a lot when I'm taking it out, putting it in. I think it's a stupid sheath. It looks kind of nice. Now that I've gotten used to it a little bit, it looks okay. But I think it's kind of a stupid sheath. I don't like it very much. It should have had a fire steel loop right here. It's called the camp knife, right? It doesn't have a fire steel loop. It doesn't fit all that well. I know it was form fit or wet fit. It just doesn't function very well. So I'm going to throw out some Kydex here. But here's a few more comments, and I'll show you some spoons that I worked on with this blade, and maybe my closing thoughts there. So at the end of the day, this really wasn't meant to be a long video, and it's kind of getting long, so I'm going to shorten it up. I use this kind of homemade sharpener and strop. It's just a work sharp belt that was getting burnt out. It's a red belt that I cut, and then the strop that I cut, and I just put it on a real flat piece of wood, and it's just enough to take off a little bit of that edge with a bevel on the 1095, flake it over, and so I can hone it again. My little girl's talking a lot in the background because she hears me talking. So very, very happy with the performance of the steel. That's really ultimately what I need to finish with today, is the performance of the steel, because my previous kind of conviction was that the 1075 was way too soft. It was not a good performer, and I just didn't like, I mean, I like the designs, I like the shapes of the previous blades, but functionally I was sharpening those things every day, and they just didn't hold up very well. And the handles were not quite enough for me. And so I'm really liking what I see so far. I'll just show you for fun. I have a craft show coming up that I'm working on some stuff for, so I've been practicing on soft woods and just doing a few spoon projects. Let's see. I always practice on the light woods before I get to the hard woods. And this knife has done a good part of this. I, of course, finished up a lot of the work with an actual Mora craft knife. But getting down to the final shape really actually was done with this knife because I just wanted to test it out and see. And black walnut is what I do a lot of my final versions in. It's a really hard wood. And even like this piece was a really hard piece of wood. Plowing through knots and stuff like that, and the fibers were just incredibly hard. And I was able to produce some finer spoons this time. I've been working on these for a long time, and I don't have a shop right now. I'm working out of an apartment. It's really hard to craft well because most of what I'm doing is not with an axe anymore. It's with knives. And so, anyways, yeah, I've been working on stuff like this, having fun. Some maple and coal rosing and those usual things. And this knife did a lot of the work, and that edge held up much, much longer. I could tell for sure 100% it is way better than the 1075, and it's adequate for what my needs are, and it sharpens up real nice, just like the 1075 did. I wouldn't say it's even harder to sharpen up. I don't perceive that at all, but it holds that edge longer. So overall, this knife definitely gets the thumbs up. It is by far my favorite Condor. I would love to see something with this handle in a short kind of craft line sized blade too, and then I could easily use that as kind of my main spoon knife. But for now, I end up using a Mora carver, and then I use this a little bit of the way, and sometimes I use an Enzo trapper. I have a few, but this definitely can do it. It's very, very, very capable. And I love the kind of Norwegian, Swedish lines, Finnish lines, you could say. I know it's supposed to be a puukko, Finnish knife. But I really do like this blade overall. I've got no reason to praise it. If it sucked, I would tell you. But I'm a pretty big fan. If you can get one for the price that I paid, which was a little over $50, I would say go ahead and buy it. Matt Graham, if you're watching this, next time, don't put these things in here. In Condor, I don't even think you should be stamping your blades. I wish you didn't put these stamps in here. The blade would look so much better if it didn't have that. But overall, very happy with the tool for what it is.